Cradle of Horror presents Noises. Sarah heard the noises again. This time she was in bed, trying desperately to fall asleep. She hadn't slept properly for a few nights. Or was it a few weeks? Time had become an incomprehensible entity to her. She had been stuck in a grad school rut for what felt like forever, and she didn't see it ending. Days felt like decades. Hours felt like centuries. 1 second felt like a millennium. And with all that time passing as slowly as possible, Sarah couldn't sleep. Sarah wasn't usually an insomniac. Even with all the stress, last-minute late-night writing, and cram sessions, she was always able to turn herself off, as she used to say. Sarah joked that she had become a machine with the easy ability to power down at night so she could be fresh to tackle the next day. That all stopped when she learned that she hadn't passed her qualifying exam. Her department had strict rules about this. Sarah could not move forward until she passed. Since then, sleep and Sarah were rarely so in sync. And then the noises started. Sarah blamed the noises, more than any stress, for her difficulty sleeping. She figured that new people moved in next door, although she hadn't seen a moving van or people carrying in furniture. But she lived on a busy street, and people often came and went. She was almost certain that the new neighbors were students subletting the apartment next door. It made the most sense. The noises were fairly incomprehensible. Sarah could have sworn that she was able to make out a word or two here and there, but nothing that quite made a full sentence, or even part of a sentence. Her family and friends who visited never heard them, but Sarah explained that they were noisier in the middle of the night. This didn't stop her parents from worrying that perhaps Sarah worked too hard, or that the stress of her school life wore on her. But Sarah always said that she was fine. Her mother never believed her, as every time she saw her, Sarah looked a little skinnier, a little less healthy, and always full of anxiety about everything. Sarah told her mother that once she passed the exam, things would go back to normal. That didn't alleviate her mother's concern, but Sarah's mother hoped she was wrong. Sarah had 6 months to take the qualifying exam again. The noises started about 2 months into that period. Sarah tried everything to ignore them. She tried to go to bed early so she'd be in a deep sleep before they started. But that didn't work since she wasn't able to fall asleep quickly enough. She tried a white noise machine, but that never helped, as the noises were louder than the highest volume available on the device. She tried sleeping on her couch, thinking that it would be farther away from the noise, but nothing worked. She always heard the noises. One day, Sarah, a usually quite introverted person, decided to finally go over to the apartment where she suspected the noises were coming from and to ask them to be quiet. She went over, knocked on the door, and didn't receive an answer. No one was there. Sarah promised herself she'd go back later, but never mustered up the courage to do it again. 4 months into studying, with only 2 months to go before the exam, Sarah heard the noises say a full word.
Coming.
Sarah, who was doing everything in her power to fall asleep, sat up completely awake upon hearing this. She was so confused. What were her neighbors referring to? Were they speaking to each other? Sarah pulled out her phone and decided to record it. She hoped to catch another actual word. At the very least, she could prove to her mother that she wasn't making it up. Sarah tried to go back to sleep, but the word rang in her head. Coming? She thought to herself. It was so strange, but she figured she only heard one word of an entire conversation her neighbors had. She was slightly annoyed, but she managed to fall back asleep. The next night, Sarah took out her phone around the same time, hoping to hear more from her neighbors. There was nothing for a while, and then she finally heard another word.
Over.
Sarah's ears perked up when she finally heard something that she could actually make out again. Yesterday they said coming, and today they said over. Was it the late nights, the stress, or the desire to have something else to ponder than her own life that made Sarah read into these words? Regardless, Sarah was determined to figure out what her neighbors were up to. It had to be something, she thought. Sarah thought about how her neighbors were sneaky. She never saw them around, and they clearly didn't want anyone to know what they were up to. After months of hearing them scurrying around in the middle of the night, Sarah knew that something was happening that shouldn't be happening next door. Sarah decided to try to knock on their door again. But she wouldn't go during the day. She'd go right away when she knew they were up. If they were always up this late, they were probably asleep during the day. So, Sarah put on a housecoat, slipped on some shoes that were sitting by the door, and headed over to her neighbor's place. She knocked on the door very lightly, so as to not disturb any of her other, more considerate neighbors. But there was no response. Sarah decided to knock a little bit harder. Still nothing. Sarah decided to bang on the door hard enough that there could be no doubt that they could hear her. And then a door opened immediately. But it wasn't the door she knocked on. It was her neighbor's door. The older gentleman who answered the door was clearly frustrated with Sarah. Sarah apologized profusely, but tried to ask the man if he could hear the noises from his apartment as well. She hoped she had found an ally. The speed at which he ignored her and closed his door would suggest she would not find her ally that night. Sarah was done playing games. She decided that the next night she would leave her phone recording the whole night so as to not miss anything. She hoped she would hear more of their plan. She knew something was going on, and yet no one else in the building seemed the slightest bit concerned. She had to figure this out on her own. The next night, Sarah put her phone by her bed and pressed the record button. She started to doze off, but then heard something that woke her back up.
You're done.
Sarah looked at her phone and breathed a sigh of relief. It was still recording. She put her head on her pillow and smiled. She had it. Sarah then slipped into the most euphoric sleep of her life. She was so content in knowing that she would have the proof that she needed. To do what with exactly? She didn't know. But she finally had proof that there were noises. And at that moment, that was enough. The next morning, Sarah listened to her phone. She played the recording while she made breakfast, checked her emails, and even started doing some housework. Hours went by, but nothing. She didn't even have the recording of the words, "You're done," the words she heard that night. Sarah decided she had to put the phone closer to the wall she shared with her neighbors. Maybe the voice sounded loud to her, but it wasn't loud enough to be picked up by her recorder. So, that night, she got ready again. This time, she placed the phone right by the wall, crawled into bed, and tried to fall asleep. Instead of sleeping, she stared at the ceiling until she heard,
It'll never happen for you.
Sarah was relieved that she had her phone recording so closely to the wall, because the sound was so faint. She wanted to check to make sure it worked, but she didn't want to stop the recording in case she heard something else. What felt like hours went by, but was actually only 10 minutes, before she heard something again. This time she heard, very clearly,
You're not enough.
Sarah smiled as she got out of bed and stopped the recording on her phone. Her smile faded when she realized that it was something that sounded familiar. Sarah didn't understand why, but she felt an intense feeling of blood rush up to her head, and she felt her heart beat out of her chest. Her breathing became beleaguered, and she struggled to find a deep breath to put herself back at ease. Then the voices said more.
Maybe try something else.
And then,
I'm not even sure how you got this far.
Sarah's struggle continued. She felt as though she was going to pass out. She felt pain as these words took over, and she didn't know what to do. She reached for her phone again and thought she should dial 911, or maybe her mother. She didn't know, and she wasn't able to make a decision. Then the voices said one more thing.
You're just not good enough.
And then Sarah passed out in her bed. Sarah woke up the next morning. She laid in bed and looked up at her ceiling. Her breathing was deep and meaningful. She felt better. Then she felt something in her hand. She realized that she was clutching her phone. The memories from the night before came back to her like a tornado. They took over her mind once more and caused her body to react again. This time she felt nauseous. She leapt from her bed and ran to the washroom to vomit. As she sat by the toilet seat, she decided to listen to the recording from the night before. She heard nothing. She decided to listen again, and this time she maxed out her volume to make sure that she didn't miss anything. Nothing, again. Frustrated, Sarah decided to call her mother and tell her about the night's events. While Sarah felt that she recounted the events of the night before with a calm and composed demeanor, her mother heard an anxiety-filled and panicked voice. Sarah's mother tried to reason with her, but Sarah was convinced. Sarah hung up on her mother, claiming that her mother was trying to make her think there was something wrong with her. Sarah went back to studying for the qualifying exam. The words from the night before haunted her mind. You're done. Maybe try something else. It'll never happen for you. You're just not good enough. I'm not even sure how you got this far. The words rang through her mind over and over again. Soon enough, the words on the pages repeated those same words. She couldn't stop hearing or seeing those words. She decided to visit her neighbor again. This time, she knocked on the door angrily, hoping someone would answer. Someone did answer. A young man, younger than Sarah. He looked at Sarah concernedly. Sarah didn't understand why. But Sarah couldn't see what the young man saw. An unkempt, unshowered, pale, and sickly young woman with bloodshot eyes. Sarah asked kindly, but forcefully, to stop being so noisy at night. The young man nodded his head, apologized, and said they would be more considerate. The young man was prepared to say anything to Sarah, hoping to make her feel better, and hoping to make her leave. Sarah walked away, confident that this ordeal was over. Sarah was wrong. That night, she heard the same words, clearer, louder, and with more conviction than any night before. She rolled around in her bed. She tried to ignore the words. She tried to make them stop, but they wouldn't. She cried. She struggled to breathe. and she started to believe the words. She felt that she'd heard them before. She knew she had. The next morning, after a night of maybe an hour or two of sleep, Sarah woke up. She was a shell of herself. She couldn't get herself to study. She couldn't eat. She couldn't do anything. She laid in bed looking at the ceiling, unable to move. It didn't matter where the words came from, she thought. They were true. Sarah had never been good enough or smart enough, she thought. She had always struggled with everything: school, friends, relationships, money. She wasn't good enough. These were words that she'd been running from for so long, and she finally realized she couldn't outrun them. She started hearing the words all day, every day. She heard them in the shower, while she studied, while she tried to eat. They were always with her. She didn't think they were coming from next door anymore. She thought she knew where they might be coming from, but she couldn't face it. She didn't know how to stop them, but worse than that, she didn't know how to not believe them. Finally, the day of her second chance to pass the qualifying exam arrived. She wasn't just a shell of herself anymore. She was nothing. The words echoed in her head as she sat outside the examination room, over and over again. The words didn't stop. She didn't even try to stop them anymore. They won't stop, she thought to herself. They won't stop until Sarah stops. Sarah stared at the wall, the words repeated like a broken record in her head. Her supervisor walked out of the examination room into the hallway. She told Sarah that they were ready for her. Sarah picked up her bag and walked away down the long hallway towards the exit, away from her supervisor. Sarah's supervisor yelled at her, "You're coming up short here, Sarah. If you walk away, you are done." Sarah continued to walk away. The farther she walked away, the farther away the words sounded. Her supervisor called out, "I always knew you were just not good enough." But Sarah didn't hear the words this time. Sarah would never hear them again.